The views and content expressed on the Pop Culture Courtroom are provided solely for educational and entertainment purposes and do not constitute legal advice. For any legal matters, please consult with a licensed attorney.
Welcome back to the Pop Culture Courtroom. I'm Matt Hardin.
And I'm Michael Kilgore.
Today we're going to be doing Seinfeld. And Seinfeld is famously a show that's about nothing. Each episode involves four friends in New York City in the 90s that get into hijinks and frankly never learn anything from them.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think they changed over 9 years.
That was one of Larry David, who's co-founded this television show with Jerry Seinfeld. They were comedian buddies.
Mm-hmm.
And when Jerry had the opportunity to do a sitcom, he brought in Larry David. And Larry David said that he had just basically two rules for the show, which is no hugs and no learning.
Well, they definitely don't learn from their actions. That's obvious from the episode we're going to be talking about today.
So we're doing The Blood from season 9. What are we going to talk about?
So we got 3 incidents from one episode. So this episode is mainly about Kramer storing his own blood in various places. He starts out at a blood bank, but then there's a problem there, so he has to bring the blood home and keep it in Tupperware containers in his apartment and possibly Jerry's. We don't know. So the first incident here we're going to talk about is when Jerry is injured in the kitchen.
Right. And so one of the other rules that Larry David had for this show is that everybody had to have their own plot in every episode. And so the one with George, and this one is tied into this episode that he is trying to bring food into the relationship with his girlfriend. The story about Jerry and Kramer, which is the main thrust of the episode. Kramer goes down to his blood bank where he has all these pints of blood stored. And like all banks, they're raising their rates. He doesn't like it, so he decides to bring it home. And Jerry gets involved in this. His side story is about him feeling like he's a little bit overweight. His parents buy him some workouts with the Mandelbaums, which would have been introduced in an earlier episode with Lloyd Bridges, who's about 85 years old, and this is his elderly son and his even more elderly father who visits him in the hospital at one point.
He's young at heart, though. He doesn't know he's 85, and so he's very tough on Jerry.
Well, I love Lloyd Bridges. He's a long-time, what we would call a character actor today. He was in a great movie with Gary Cooper called High Noon, which is one of my favorite movies. It's an old movie, which is very interesting because it's known for a movie that takes place in the actual time the movie is going on, where basically everyone forsakes him and he ends up being one man against the world in this, and then goes home with Grace Kelly after that, which is
well, you can't beat that. Yeah.
But Lloyd Bridges plays his deputy in it, and he feels like he's being slighted because Gary Cooper's character is supposed to retire and not be sheriff anymore, and he's upset that he doesn't get to be the hero, so he doesn't really participate in the battle with the gunfighters later.
Yeah, I need to try that one. I really enjoy classic Westerns.
So the little side ruse that's going on with Kramer and Newman in this is they've decided they're going to make their own sausage. There's a second food subplot in it where George is using a scalpel to take the top off of puddings because he likes the skim on the top.
Yes.
Jerry gets upset with everybody using his kitchen for this and goes and strikes down on the cutting board. Scalpel jumps up in the air. Kramer yells, "Watch out." Jerry just kind of looks at it. The scalpel gets him in the jugular.
Yeah, and it creates an interesting legal scenario because in this particular situation, Jerry is injuring himself. So what do you make of that from a legal sense?
Well, I think there's a couple things going on here. If you typically injure yourself, like if you crash your own car into a tree for reasons you weren't paying attention to the road, you were playing with your phone or something like that, your insurance may cover the property damage, but you're not going to have a personal injury claim for something that you did to yourself. Otherwise, there'd probably be a bunch of scofflaws out there injuring themselves just to get, ill-gotten money from insurance. The secondary part of this is we find out when Jerry gets in the hospital that he has somehow been given not 1, not 2, but 3 pints of Kramer's blood at home prior to getting to the hospital. So I think, number one, that's absolutely ridiculous. I don't know.
Yeah.
Are you think you're going to have the stuff to do a blood transfusion at home in Jerry's apartment?
Well, Kramer strikes me as the kind of character who just might have that kind of equipment in his apartment. He always seems to have what he wants.
Well, I think the problem though is we don't know what type of blood Jerry has. We don't know what type of blood that Kramer has, and it's
Right.
a big deal to get the wrong type of blood, and it can, at minimum, make you very ill and frankly can kill you.
Right. And so that kind of opens Kramer up to potential litigation and civil damages.
Well, I mean, I don't remember Kramer working more than for a few days in this entire show. He's always coming up with different money schemes. He's somehow falls backwards into money left and right.
Yeah.
He often is litigious. There's half a dozen episodes that involve, Jackie Childs, who's an attorney based on Johnny Cochran, who is most famous for defending OJ in the criminal action in the 90s,
Yeah.
but later became a very prominent civil lawyer, pursuing cases like our firm does. He's been dead a very long time, but his firm continued running commercials with him from the grave for many, many years after that.
Yeah.
The Cochran firm actually had one of their offices was in the same office that I worked in, or same building I worked in Memphis, and I ran up the elevator a few times with him.
Did you really?
And he was always wearing, and I don't know if this was just the fashion then, but he was always wearing suits that had very large shoulder pads at each side. So the first time I met him, he was wearing a purple suit with shoulder pads, and he shook my hand and said hello to me. He's very, very friendly. And then he took a phone call in the elevator up. It was Lou Holtz that he was talking to. So he leaned over to us. Lou Holtz is calling me, and you could hear Lou's kind of a marble mouth dude. It was the famous coach of Notre Dame, and later for South Carolina, and now has been an announcer for many years.
That's amazing. Did you ever mention the OJ trial or the gloves don't fit? You must
I
admit.
absolutely did not.
I don't know if I could have resisted.
My take on it was that he's had thousands of people ask him about that, and
Yeah.
at the time, I was much more interested in talking to him about what Lou Holtz had to say, 'cause that was more interesting to me, at least. But the Jackie Childs character shows up again and again in the end of the show. There's, the first one involves Kramer spilling hot coffee on himself, which mirrors a famous McDonald's case that happened that lots of people think is not a legitimate case. But if you actually go back and read the facts of that case, that particular restaurant had been warned many, many times about having their coffee at such a hot, borderline lava level. And that's what led to that recovery. And it was more about the fact that they knew it was a problem and they kept doing it. And then that woman ended up getting third-degree burns, basically on her lap area, which was egregious, had to have skin grafts and things like that. So in the actual Seinfeld part of that, do you remember what happened in that episode?
I remember Kramer sells out his attorney for some kind of side deal, right?
So the coffee people are coming in to offer them a deal, and they have a long list of what they're going to do with money damages and things. The very first thing they say in that episode is, "You can have free coffee for life in any of our outlets nationwide." And Kramer goes, "I'll take it."
Yeah, I remember that now.
So, Jackie ends up representing him a few more times. There's another time when runs a smoking lounge and has a
Yes.
face, and once again, he takes a side deal on that to where they make him the Marlboro Man and put him in Times Square
Yes.
instead of taking money damages.
Yeah, and these coffee cases still happen. I just read that Starbucks is involved in one where the lady didn't get a lid secured on a cup, and she handed it to an Uber driver, and he spilled it on his lap.
Especially with the delivery with Uber Eats and
Yeah.
those type of DoorDash type places. You're relying on your staff to make sure you're not putting folks at risk. And if you're in a car, you need to have that lid down tight. Now, should you as a consumer make sure it's tight? You probably should. So,
Yeah.
We've talked about comparative fault on this show a lot of times, and that basically means that more than one person can be at fault, including the person who's suing. And if you're drinking coffee and you haven't checked out your own lid, you're probably going to get some fault out of that percent that's divvied up by a jury.
Yeah, you gotta take some level of personal responsibility when you're able to.
Let's circle back to this incident where Jerry stabs himself in the throat. I think the analogy of that for Jerry's injury to himself is crashing your car into a tree.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's liability for that, or you're going to be able to sue someone for that?
Well, you'd only sue yourself, so there pretty much would not be a recovery if you cause injury to yourself.
So one of the things that I thought of with the Kramer giving him his blood, something called the Good Samaritan law. So would the Good Samaritan law shield Kramer in this case from a lawsuit from Jerry if there ended up being an issue with the blood transfusion?
Well, as always, to any good legal question, the answer is it depends. So, uh, in Tennessee, we've got a statute that codifies the Good Samaritan law, like a lot of other states, I'm sure, do. A Good Samaritan law basically protects people from being sued for civil damages if they render emergency care to another person. So if you're out and you're injured somewhere, someone tries to help you, then you can't sue them if you end up getting hurt in that process somehow. And Kramer here, I think, was trying to be a Good Samaritan, but there is an exception. There's an exception to the Good Samaritan law for gross negligence. And gross negligence is regular negligence. So we've got duty, breach, causation, and damages.
That basically means that someone is doing something outside the pale, what you should normally do under that circumstance. For our purposes, probably the easiest way to look at it is go back to our car wreck analogy. If you are driving along and you see a red light and decide to go through it and you T-bone a car because of that, well, you had a duty to obey what the laws were in your state. You have a duty to other drivers to drive in a safe manner. And if you just disregard a red light, you've breached that duty. And then it's whether you've caused an injury that wouldn't have happened otherwise to that person and whether they had damages for it. You've had to go to the hospital or see a doctor about it. So the gross negligence, I believe, is what we call as a heightened standard. What does that mean?
Seinfeld would have to prove that Kramer was indifferent to Seinfeld's injurious consequences. He had a conscious recklessness for Jerry Seinfeld's rights.
Well, I think in this case, I don't know that I believe it would be difficult to prove that it is reckless for Kramer to be practicing medicine without a license, without typing Jerry's blood, and I think assuming what you said is correct, that he had some kind of apparatus to do it. I don't know how you get blood in somebody without having some
Yeah.
type of medical equipment to do the transfusion. And so then we're hoping that this unlicensed adult man-child that lives next door to Jerry and uses his refrigerator and nearly everything in his house in every episode has this equipment. So he must have it. I mean,
Yeah.
the supposition also is that from the writer is, what are we going to do? We just got to pour the blood in and we got to have him swallow it. I mean, so if we go down the road of that he somehow was able to do not just one, not two, but 3 pints of blood into Jerry instead of just calling 911. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not like he doesn't know how to use Jerry's phone. He's on his phone all the time. Like
Yeah.
in nearly every episode we see Kramer in there, he's making phone calls from Jerry. Plus, it's a crime to practice medicine without a license in most states, if not all. Do we have negligence here? Yes. Do we know whether it caused Jerry any problems? It doesn't seem to. I mean, he's in the hospital. He seems perked up. He's, a little bit upset that he's got Kramer's blood, and then Kramer uses the rest of the episode to get extra favors from Jerry because he's given him his blood in this episode.
Yeah. Unless Jerry was damaged somehow, I don't think he's got a case here.
Probably not. And I think we're having to suspend disbelief that somehow they did this correctly and got these multiple transfusions. I mean, they show the blood in the car later, which we're going to talk about in a minute. It's sloshing around. I mean, I don't, blood doesn't do that. I mean, it's thicker than that. And it's, normally in these very sterile containers instead of Tupperware, which is what Kramer somehow has this blood in, which, leads to all kinds of other issues. I don't think that Kramer's use of his Tupperware is going to be sterile. I mean, it's Jerry's. I mean, Jerry's known for being a little fussy about things being cleaned, but is that going to reach the level of being sterile enough to keep someone's blood in it?
No.
Probably not.
No.
I mean, Kramer makes food in his shower during this show.
Yeah.
He puts a garbage disposal in his own shower in like the later season. And
Yeah. I wouldn't trust Kramer to create a sterile environment for sure.
so I think on this first incident, we are in agreement. It's a nowhere road, unless, well, at least on the Jerry portion, the Kramer portion, we don't seem to have any injury or real damages here other than Jerry being upset that he has Kramer's blood in him, which doesn't seem to really cause him anything. Because remember our theme of the show, they don't learn anything.
Right. So that leads us to our next incident where Kramer is driving his blood to another blood bank.
Right, and he's borrowed Jerry's car because it has air conditioning and his own car does not. Jerry's car, the radiator, started having a little bit of smoke come up from the engine.
Yeah.
Kramer's trying to protect his blood and ultimately decides that he's going to pour blood into the radiator instead of a lot of other options. I mean, I've seen movies where people or shows where people pee in it. Still a lot closer than what blood would be to being what a radiator is. You know, radiator is used in these cars in order to cool the heat of the engine down by circulating around the engine. And in this case, we've got blood, which is definitely thicker than water, as they say. Do I think that's going to work very well?
No.
No.
And of course, it doesn't work well, and it causes a lot of damage to Jerry's car. So, do we think Jerry could sue Kramer for property damage?
100%.
Yeah.
So he's given permission for him to drive this car. He has done an intentional act, which is probably going to injure the vehicle or make the engine not run properly. I mean, those radiators in cars are pretty big. I mean, a lot of them have liters and liters of liquid in them, you know, coolant or antifreeze, depending on where you are living, where you might need something to make sure it doesn't freeze in the winter. And up where they are up north, it's definitely going to be antifreeze in there. So there is a property claim here. It's done intentionally. Kramer strikes me as a gent that would not have car insurance. I mean, there's all kinds of theories out there that he's independently wealthy. I mean, he works a few episodes during this show, but almost none during the 9 seasons the show's on the air. He just seems to fall into money and mooches off of Jerry during the entire series.
Yeah, one time he goes to work in some office where he's not even getting paid. He just shows up and takes a desk and starts eating crackers and being stressed out for no reason, and he never gets paid.
And he ultimately gets fired for a job that he doesn't have.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's probably got like I think New York still has a lot of those rent controlled apartments. So he's probably paying a lesser amount. So if we go with the theory that he's independently wealthy somehow and just living a very frugal lifestyle, you know, he probably can pay the property damage. Jerry is always portrayed as being very well off, as having this successful comedy career. You know, the first few seasons you see his stand-up. They talk about his travel, but we don't see a whole lot of it. You know, every once in a while they'll be at the airport or something where he's going somewhere. He talks about booking gigs. But he's always portrayed as being successful. He very likely has insurance. I mean, he just drives nice cars during this. He never seems to have any issues with money.
Yeah.
As opposed to his other 3 friends that are in the show, which kind of wax and wane with their problems. So he's likely going to be able to make a claim for this with his car insurance. If not, he's through his policy. You know, if you have a problem caused to your vehicle that's caused by someone else, often you're uninsured or what they call underinsured. Motorist coverage is going to do it, depending on what the contract of the insurance says.
Yeah.
If not, you know, having to rebuild an engine because there's blood all through it. I mean, I don't know if there's probably a way just to flush the radiator system. I don't know that it's going to get in the other compartments of the engine based on how radiator systems work.
And it's funny during this situation that Kramer is borrowing Jerry's car, which he ultimately ruins or at least seriously damages. So Jerry has loaned his car to Kramer and Kramer damages it. How can you handle that kind of a situation legally?
Well, typically, if you have loaned a car to someone, your insurance will cover it because insurance goes with the car before the person. So, you know, that comes up in our practice quite a bit in car wreck cases where you may have somebody that's a passenger in somebody else's vehicle. They get crashed into. Well, the person who caused the wreck, his insurance is going to be in first place or whatever goes with their car. If they're driving someone else's car, then that insurance is going to be in play too. If you're a passenger in someone else's car, then their insurance would be in the next place, and then their own insurance would be in fourth place. And so in this case, the only thing would be if there's an exclusion. So, I mean, insurance for cars and any other type of insurance, life insurance, health insurance, they're all contracts. And so contracts, what's covered is going to be whatever is written in that, plus whatever the law of your state allows. And so in this case, he's given permission to him, and unless Kramer is an excluded driver, and normally excluded drivers are not going to be some friend that lives near you. It's just whoever is listed that the insurance is. So, for example, in my house, we had, someone helping with our children where they would drive them around. She was insured in her car, but she was not insured under our policy to drive our cars. So we just always had her drive around. And that's a very common thing.
Yeah. I would bet Jerry's insurance company knows Kramer and would not want him driving Jerry's Saab.
Well, they definitely would know him after the first of what might be multiple claims from him.
Right. He's a serial claimer
Right.
or claimant.
So this third incident, we're back to the Mandelbaums again. Izzy Mandelbaum has now taken Jerry out with his younger son, who also appears to be elderly, who is driving Jerry's car. And while Jerry is tied with a rope around his waist behind him, all while Izzy Mandelbaum is insulting him and calling him things like daffodil and cupcake as he does it. So we've now circled back. Remember what we've talked about earlier when Kramer has put the blood in Jerry's car. Well, at this point, there appears to be something leaking somehow onto the interior of the car, onto the feet. And Jerry realizes that what's leaking is Kramer's blood, tells him that. Izzy Mandelbaum's son guns the engine and subsequently drags Jerry on the ground for what they say is at least a quarter mile. While the injuries are not ever stated what they are, if you're dragged by a car that has gunned their engine, is going 30 miles an hour on a roadway, to the point that it has opened up your body to where you need yet another blood transfusion for the second time in this episode.
Yeah.
You are grievously injured.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would expect Jerry would be. Here we've got an injury that's caused by the personal trainer and his agent, who is also his son. So we would expect that this personal trainer would have a business in New York, and most businesses, if not all of them, are required to have insurance. So Jerry would be able to sue his personal trainer and get access to some of that insurance.
Well, I tend to think there's a few things going on here. We do see the Mandelbaum gym earlier in the episode where he's punching him, where he looks like it's a kitty cat punching him or something, as this elderly man does it. And then they go out on the road. And so if we start off with the premise that, is it negligent to tie someone up to their own car while driving to get them to exercise? I think that's negligence number one, because there's some recklessness to that. I mean, we have in modern times, we have treadmills, we have things like that where, Pelotons where you can pick the elevation of it, go up or down, make the speed go up and down based on how you want to make it. So you start off with negligence number one. Negligence number two is him gunning the engine when he sees there's blood there, instead of stopping the car, putting it in park, and just getting it out and investigating it.
Right.
He panicked under the circumstances. Would you expect to be blood on the car? No. If you've got some kind of fear of blood or some forth, it's still negligence. And so I think you got your original setup that's negligent. So the Mandelbaum business is getting sued. Izzy's getting sued. His son's getting sued. Has Jerry assumed the risk in this a bit? So compared to fault, we talked about the percentages. What does it mean if Jerry assumes the risk?
Yeah, I mean, that whole scene, I'm sitting there wondering, why would Jerry ever let himself get tied to his vehicle? He may be assigned a percentage of the fault for going along with it, for allowing himself to be put in that position. And so if that's the case, his damages would be reduced by the percentage that a jury assigns to him in comparative fault.
So the damages in this case are going to depend on what Jerry's injuries are, what his, medical bills cost for treatment. He's been hospitalized twice in this episode. This is the second time.
Yeah.
And we get to the hospital and we find out that this time Newman has gone to the hospital and they have somehow given him Newman's blood, Newman is famously Jerry's Lex Luthor in this case. He's a sworn enemy for reasons we never understand, and that's kind of a side issue here. But if he's injured enough to need more pints of blood from this, he's probably significantly injured. We don't ever hear what that actually is, but he's in a hospital bed. I mean, they put him in a room. If you just have a minor neck pain from a wreck and you go into the hospital, they're going to give you a CT scan or something, make sure you don't have a broken bone, and then send you on your way to go back to a orthopedic doctor in a few days if you think you're worse. Here, he's been put in a hospital room, and that usually denotes that you've got a more serious injury. I want to circle back to your comparative fault thing. So, juries are basically on their jury verdict form are given 100%, and then they can assign whatever percentages of fault they want to each person that they believe is at fault. So, does Kramer get put on this too because he's the one that put the blood in? Probably, but I think he's probably not gonna get a whole lot of fault because did he know that he's probably doing the best that he can? I mean, he's apparently a part-time doctor and not a part-time mechanic.
Yeah, and I think Jerry might have a claim for emotional distress once the Newman's blood goes into him. He's gonna have to document that with counseling and therapy, which he may need to get over the adjustment of having Newman's blood.
I don't think you should defend that, though. I mean, he lets Newman take a nap in his bed in this episode, so it's gonna at least appear like they're buddies.
Yeah,
And it's, Jerry Seinfeld was once asked, all the guest stars on the show, which character he would have had on there more, and it was, Wayne Knight who plays Newman.
yeah.
He's in 40 or so episodes of this show, and Jerry has said that they should have made him the 5th cast member because he loved Superman, and he loved having, an enemy for his character to play off of in this show, so
Yeah.
ultimately, when you're looking at this, so this third incident, that's the one that personal injury lawyers are gonna perk up at and say, "This is something that we can get some money for Mr. Seinfeld for
Yeah.
and then make some money on the legal fee portion of it as well." This driver didn't do it on purpose, but everything about that situation was pretty reckless.
Yeah, there was a wanton disregard for Jerry's well-being in that situation.
That's right. All right, so we're gonna move on to our relevant evidence portion. Today, we are going to look at who do you think would be the most reliable character on the show if you had a real life emergent situation like Jerry faces a couple of times in this episode? Well,
Yeah, well, it's kinda slim pickings based on who you see on the show. If I'm going from the main characters, I've gotta choose Elaine because she's the only main character who holds down a job. She's reasonably competent, somewhat empathetic, and she gets more done than the other 3, it seems like. But I only really reach her by process of elimination because she's pretty clumsy herself. I can't pick Jerry because he's very selfish and he's not gonna go out of his way. I remember in one episode, he forgot to pick Elaine up from the airport. George, he's only gonna be able to help if there's some sort of deceit or lying going on. If he can work in his Art Vandelay persona or, lie about saving a whale on the beach, then he's your guy. But otherwise, I wouldn't include him. And Kramer just seems very clumsy. So I can't pick Kramer, and I'm only left with Elaine from the main 4 characters.
so I would throw out in this particular episode, The Blood, Elaine's subplot involves her trying to prove herself to a single mother friend of hers with a very precocious at best child that
Yeah.
kicks people and things in this episode, where she is upset that this friend does not ask her to be a babysitter, and in one part, she actually asked Kramer to do it instead of
Yes.
her. And so Elaine, being upset with that, goes out as a subterfuge. Kramer's about to knock on the door, and instead she shoves him into the bushes and says he couldn't come. So I'm not sure that she is the most reliable of characters either. I mean, there's a prominent later episode where Elaine's current boyfriend gets injured. She is called while at a movie theater and told that he has an injury and has been hospitalized for it.
Oh, yeah.
And instead of going directly to go see how her boyfriend, who she purportedly loves, is, she stops off to buy jujubes from the movie theater candy counter.
I remember that.
And then brings them to the hospital, eats them in front of her, and he, deduces pretty quickly, "Where did you get those?" "Oh, did you have them before?" And then she has to tell him that she bought them after she heard, and then he dumps her because of it.
And her mouth is so full she can't even answer him.
And that's your reliable character. So
I mean,
I
by process of elimination.
so to be fair to you, you're picking one of the major characters, and this to me is, so many modern TV shows do not really give you a character to root for. They're all very shades of gray, anti-hero people.
Yeah.
I would argue this is one of the first shows where you don't, while it's a fun show and it's funny and it's a lark, there is no one to root for here,
Yeah.
unless you're talking about some of the side characters that are on the show. So I tend to think that I'm better off going with one of the side characters. I thought about Jackie Childs at first.
Mm-hmm.
He's our fellow lawyer. He's trying to help these folks out, which is part of it. We make a living doing this, but I do always appreciate the fact that we're, helping people with a hard situation. And that's something that I do get satisfaction out of what we do. In this case, Jackie Childs does not seem to care as much about that as he does about whatever check he's going to get. At some point in this show, he does a restraining order on Kramer, yet then comes back later and does the Marlboro Man. Well, Jackie goes around the bend in the finale of this series where he's actually representing them somehow in this criminal action. You don't normally go back from civil to criminal. Most
Right.
lawyers, unless you're in a smaller town, are picking one or the other because it's just hard to be a generalist and end up being an expert at it if you're doing everything. Well, Jackie just mails it in and they end up getting served prison for like a year or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I held off. I thought about him at first. So the character I ended up focusing on was David Putty, played by Patrick
Oh,
Warburton,
yes.
who's Elaine's very off and on again boyfriend throughout the latter parts of this series. We meet him as he's described as a friend of Jerry Seinfeld's, who's his only honest mechanic in New York. And so he tells him exactly what's going on with his vehicle. He's honest about it. He later on is portrayed as an honest car salesman,
Mm-hmm.
at a dealership. He's also one of the few religious characters on this show. There's an entire episode where Elaine is upset because Elaine is an atheist and Putty is talking about being a Christian and how he's going to go to heaven. And so I think he's one of the very few characters on this show that seems to live his life with some level of honor, when that's pretty rare in this world. I would say the downside of him would be that he and Elaine break up over nothing over and over and over again, including by the finale where she tells him not to wait for her. He just says, okay.
Yeah, but you do make a compelling case about Putty. I think he might outrank Elaine.
Well, I think you were doing the best you could with the main characters, and I would have a hard time deciding between. It's definitely not George and Kramer. I think Kramer would want to help you, but would mess it up. I would probably, of the main characters, I probably would go with Jerry because he's a fussy character. He's on time to things. He shows up when he's supposed to. So I'd probably go with him, but I get Elaine. I mean, she's definitely way more responsible than the other two.
Yeah.
She has the one time that she gets fired from her job where they do the opposite thing, where George is always messed up, but he does the opposite and ends up being, hired by the Yankees.
And she gets fired for eating too many lemon poppy seed muffins. She does have that drug history that you got to watch out for.
She tests positive for opium when she's working for the clothing catalog. I think he sends her off to rehab or something.
Uh-huh.
And it's really just all about eating muffins.
And she's got to borrow Jerry's mother's urine to pass a test, but she still doesn't get to go on the trip she wants to go on. So.
Because she's going through menopause.
Right.
That's right. Well, I think we both love this show. It's still popular years and years later.
Yeah.
They only did 9 seasons of this show. Jerry Seinfeld was offered over $100 million to do another one, and he just thought they needed to wrap it up creatively. And it holds up. It's definitely a show of its time of the 90s, but it's still very creative, and I think people still really enjoy it. So
yeah, I don't think there's another one like it.
Well, thank you all for joining us this week on the Pop Culture Courtroom. We'll see you next time.
The Pop Culture Courtroom is a Matt Hardin Law production.
If you've been involved in a car wreck or any other type of personal injury or wrongful death case, check us out at matthardinlaw.com or give us a call at 615-200-1111.